Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Jen Barrett, the Orleans County State's Attorney. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
And this is the first show I have had in our new digs here on the end of Main Street in Newport. How do you like them?
This place is beautiful. It's definitely an upgrade. There's a lot of space. The technology is better. It's great.
And it's only a walk from the courthouse.
Not too far from the courthouse.
Right. To the viewers, the news station is located on the end of Main Street. Many of you will remember as the old Associated Insurance Building. So, what brings you here today? You've been here many times. What topics do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the things that I've been doing in the last 4 years for the county.
Right, and you've really brought a lot of visibility to the office. I think you've had some really great cases, some great resolutions, and how do you think you've been doing?
So it's been going really great. There has been a lot of tough cases, but we've been working really hard to bring justice to Orleans County. When I took office, the things that I wanted to do were improve on the domestic violence prosecution, work on child abuse cases, and combat the opiate epidemic. And I think that we've taken great steps to do those things.
How's the opiate epidemic doing? Is it getting any better?
So it's hard to tell, Scott, if there's any progress, but what we have been doing is doing our part. So I'm not delusional. You can't arrest your way out of the opiate epidemic, and people are still using heroin in our community. But what we've done is made a concerted effort to target people who are selling for profit in the community and the people who are trafficking the drugs in from out of state.
You know, I kind of understand how somebody could get involved with opiates a few years ago. There's a part of me that understands, people either getting addicted through the doctors, but a lot of them addicted because they were having fun. I understand that, but I don't understand anymore. It's kind of like starting smoking now. If you were like several decades ago, I understand how somebody started smoking cigarettes, but I have no concept of how somebody would say, oh, I am going to start using opiates now, knowing exactly what it leads to. There has to be a decline on the number of people starting, but you probably wouldn't know that for sure.
No, that's not something that I'm able to comment on. It's interesting, though, because it really is ravishing the community. It's really a negative thing for Orleans County, especially with how isolated we are. And we're still seeing a lot of opiate use.
Do you think your work and the work of law enforcement is at least keeping them on their toes?
I think it's helping. So we did the Valentine's Day bust, and there was 28 arrests at that time, and that was an effort between the Drug Task Force, the State's Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and there was 28 arrests then. And there was a period of time after that sweep where we picked up people who were selling what we describe as above their means, so making a profit, where the task force was unable to buy heroin because we had cut out the suppliers. But there's other people who move in, and that continues. The supply continues to come here, but there was at least a period of time where it was difficult to buy heroin in Orleans County, and that's sort of what we're going for.
Right. You know, the dumbest thing I heard or read about that Valentine's raid was that a couple of people actually wrote on Facebook that it was so rude to do that on Valentine's when they're celebrating love and everything, and they raided them on Valentine's. Now that took a special kind of stupid to be making those comments, and just maybe those raids, like I can tell you for a fact, I know there's at least one person whose parents say thank you because it really turned a person's life around. And sometimes it takes tough things like going to jail to, change your ways.
Yeah, there's been a number of people who were involved in the Valentine's Day bus. Either they themselves or their families have thanked me for the work that we do. And so it is hard that it got to the point where an arrest was necessary, and for some of them, jail. But a lot of the people that we come into contact with who are using opiates at the time and get clean thank us for helping them. And not everyone thanks us, but there's certainly a population of people who can acknowledge that the hard arrest led to their sobriety.
Right. Now this is a topic I didn't ask you about, and you can tell me you don't have any comment on it. What impact do you think the legalization of marijuana will have on the whole opiate crisis? Will it help it? Will it make it worse? Or do you have any comment?
Well, it will certainly make the job of law enforcement more difficult.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how it impacts the opiate epidemic specifically, but legalizing marijuana without having a specific mechanism to enforce impaired driving is really problematic from a public safety standpoint. We have a lot of DUIs in Orleans County, and we have a lot of drug DUIs with heroin and other opiates, and now adding the marijuana to it without adding the saliva test to test for marijuana, it just makes everyone's job more challenging and will make it harder for us to detect people who are driving under the influence.
Yeah, because there's some theories that that marijuana that people just turn to that and they won't go on to harder drugs. But I don't really know what to believe. So, and I think only time will tell. So first of all, what am I doing wrong in life? I have gone all my life. I haven't gotten a speeding ticket. Can you believe that? My wife, who you know, she got all giddy here in recent days because I was going a little bit over the speed limit, and she knew if she'd been behind the wheel of the car, she would have, the cop that came up, we're going different directions. She saw the blue light come on, and she knew one of her things on her bucket list was going to be checked off. I was going to get a ticket because she's so tired of me talking about her tickets. Except the officer turned on his blue light, turned it off just to say, slow down. I have never had a mugshot. I'm 53 years old. Is it too late for me to start a life of crime? Do you get many people my age just starting out?
We do have the occasional person your age starting out, but if you keep bragging about not getting a speeding ticket, I'm sure you're going to jinx yourself eventually.
Tell me, if I do go get in trouble and I come in to your courtroom with this, will this help me at all?
Absolutely not, Scott.
Because, it says get out of jail free.
Yeah, it does say that.
So if anybody goes in with that, that's, monopoly card, that doesn't bear any weight in the Orleans County courtroom.
Absolutely not, Scott.
Come on, I was trying.
So what we do try to do, though, is we use a lot of restorative justice. So for the people who do commit crimes for the first time in their low-level offenses, we're using an incredible amount of diversion. And so that would avoid the conviction and allow you to expunge your indiscretion off your record. And so we're using that at a really high rate. I think when I looked at it last year, there was something like 30 to 40% of our misdemeanor, low-level offenses, qualifying offenses, or certain offenses that can't go, we're going to diversion. And so those people are having the opportunity to do a community-based resolution and have it removed from their record and act as though it never existed.
Because in all seriousness, let's be real, even you, the state's attorney, have probably done something in your life where you could have found yourself on the other side of the law. As in, like, if you go through every law book there is, you can bust anybody. And I think we all do something that the only thing is we didn't get caught. And I think diversion's a great thing because, I know it isn't, if I go out and shoot somebody, I'm not going to get diversion. But if, I'm not really sure what, but there's many things we do that, that are not that serious, and a single transgression, I'm glad it can be forgiven sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool that we have. We see a lot of retail thefts now with the new Walmart, and a lot of people who don't have anything on their record and decided to steal from Walmart. I should tell the viewers, they have an incredible video system.
Yeah, I know.
And so they almost always get caught. And we use a lot of diversion in those cases, people who don't have a record and stole for the first time. And for some of the people, it's enough to be cited into court or arrested by law enforcement, to have to come in front of a judge and then go to diversion and sit in front of a number of your peers from the community and make the community whole again. And for a lot of people, that's enough.
Right. But one thing that probably keeps me from ever breaking the law, I don't want to see myself in the paper either. Is I think that would be totally embarrassing. And if I ever go before you with as a person who broke the law, I sure hope it's interesting at least, and not something totally stupid. So are you seeing an upswing in crime because of the opiate epidemic?
I don't know that we're seeing an uptick in crime. I think that the crime levels, at least in terms of the number of cases, have been consistent over the last 5 to 10 years. So even before I got here, we're not having an alarming number of increase in crime. We have seen some pretty serious crimes that are related to drugs, some that are still pending, and so certainly those are concerning, but in general, I don't think that we are seeing an uptick in the number of crimes in Orleans County.
I will say this, I've heard people say it was really nice before you got there because because a lot of people got away with a lot, but I know you don't want to comment on that, but I have heard people say you're tough. But I think most people have said you're fair.
So I guess I can't comment generally on what the public thinks, but I try to be tough but fair.
Right.
And so, like I said, we use a lot of diversion. We give a lot of people that chance. We try to be fair when people come in, but when somebody commits a very serious offense,
Right.
I'm tough. And so in terms of the domestic violence cases that we've done over the last 3 to 4 years, we have been holding people accountable. We've gotten some really significant sentences. We had a strangulation case where we got 5 to 15 years to serve. We had a case recently that was an aggravated domestic with strangulation and some teeth were broken out, and we got 4 to 12 years to serve. And so we've been working really hard to hold repeat and serious domestic abusers accountable. And so that's something that is not popular amongst people who are violent with their spouses, but it's something that I'm passionate about and I think is necessary for the community.
You know, the one thing I'd hate to be in your job in the sense of the denial. I'd throw extra time if they just cannot. When the person's, because there are cases where as you know, there's a question, even you probably have some cases where you just don't know what happened. But there's cases where the people are dead wrong and they will not own up to it. Do they have to, before a sentencing, do they have to accept responsibility, or do they not, or can you add time on for people who are just in total denial?
So one of the misconceptions with the community is that I pick the outcome, right? And so one of the things that I would love to clear up is that I suggest an outcome to the judge, and the judge can accept it or deny it. So when people think that I'm too tough, a judge has determined that that's also a fair sentence. Or we've gone to a contested sentencing, and I presented evidence, and the judge determines the sentence. And so we don't get to add time for things. But the court does consider someone taking accountability in terms of what an appropriate sentence is. So, for example, where someone's either pled guilty or been found guilty by a jury, and then they're still saying, I didn't do it, or it's not my fault, or they're blaming the victim or somebody else for their actions, the judge can consider that and add additional time for not taking responsibility for their actions, but that would be the judge's determination.
And I've also seen, on the flip side though, I've seen you get blamed like, well, what was she thinking? How come the sentence is so little? You know what I mean? Is sometimes people say you're too hard, then you'll have another group too easy, when it actually falls into the hands of the judge most of the time.
Yeah, I think that that's something that's challenging. So in Vermont, judges rotate every year, and sometimes we have judges who are tougher, and sometimes we have judges who are more lenient. And the defendants or the people who come to the court know. And so there are times where someone will come and plead open, which means I get to ask for any sentence I want. And then the judge imposes some sentence that I don't necessarily think is fair or that I agree with. But there's nothing I can do other than present the evidence and tell the court why I want the resolution that I want, and then the judge decides. And so one of the things that people don't understand is how large of an impact having a specific judge or a different judge sitting in court really makes for the community.
Right. Now, what am I doing wrong here? Another thing I've never been called to jury duty. I've often said, I read people on Facebook, oh, they're complaining about jury duty. They're complaining about it. They don't want to do it. I'm sitting here, hey, me over here, I'll do it. How come I don't, 53 years, well, the first 18, I couldn't, but I haven't been drawn. What am I doing wrong? I'm not a convicted felon.
It's a random pool. Some people get called multiple times and some people don't. But what I would like to remind their viewers is that we need reasonable people on our juries.
Are you saying I'm not reasonable?
No, Scott. What I'm saying is you were commenting how a lot of people complain about jury duty. And I understand that it's not the most pleasant and that you're losing money, but it's such an important task to have people who are solid community members sitting on a jury. Think about it, Scott. If you were on a jury, you'd want people who were fair, reasonable community members. And plenty of your friends don't want to sit on jury duty, but it's important to have those people when we're selecting from the pool. If we only had people who wanted to be on jury duty, I mean, some people, it's good that they want to be on jury duty, but there's some people who want to be on jury duty just to convict or not convict people.
Well, my brother, who he sat in on a jury, and he said in that case, if he ever ended up in the courtroom, he'd go before a judge, because he said the group he was with, it wasn't anything to do with guilty or innocent. It was guilt. It was like the idea of how can we get out of here the quickest. You must run into those juries every once in a while where they don't particularly take their job seriously, or do you?
So we don't generally get to hear the input of why a jury did or did not convict, or why they wanted to get out of there. But that's always something that we're concerned about, because certainly both the state and the defense want a fair jury. We want people who are going to consider the evidence, listen to the evidence, and make a determination based on, did the state prove its case or did we not? And the cases that go to jury trial are hard cases, and they're complex. If they're clearly guilty, generally there's some type of plea agreement or some type of agreement that they make to try to mitigate their potential sentence instead of going to trial and facing the maximum. And so we don't know what the juries do, but there have been times where juries seem to rush or something like that.
I think the one thing you've done, and I think your race that you were in to get this position, I think you've done a great job at bringing to light the role of the state's attorney. Because, truth be told, I think before you, even when, during the years of where you had, somewhat accomplished state's attorneys, I don't think a lot of people understood the role, and I still think people are still just learning. But I think you coming out here, coming on the show, coming on my radio show, you're educating people at the same time, because, I don't think, I used to cover the court news occasionally years ago when I was with the newspaper, and I had a pretty good grasp of it, but every time you come on the show, I learn something new. So I think you've done a great community outreach.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And I think it's important that the community knows what we can do, what we can't do, and what our role is. And I think that that's something that we've been educating in the community about for the last 3 or 4 years, but it's something that there's certainly more to learn.
And you're not a one-person operation.
Oh, no. I have 2 deputy state's attorneys who work for me. I have 2 victim advocates, one's part-time and one's full-time, and 2 support staff or administrative staff.
Right. Now, this often is, people often say this, well, the person's totally guilty. You know, they were caught red-handed. They even admitted in their affidavit or whatever that they're guilty, but then they go to court and they plead not guilty. And people don't understand, why do people do that? That seems to be pretty standard. You go for arraignment, you plead not guilty.
So, yes, generally, even if people want to take accountability for their actions, at the initial court proceeding, they plead not guilty. And that gives them time to talk to the state and see what we're looking at for a sentence. It gives them a time to review the discovery by law enforcement. It gives them time to present to us any mitigating factors, anything that they've done, treatment, counseling, to be able to present that to try to impact what is the outcome or what is the sentence.
So if I was charged with I don't know, just, you know, I didn't go out and like kill somebody. It was just, you know, random stuff. And I walked in on arraignment day and I just said, I'm guilty. That's it. That wouldn't help me at all, or would it?
Well, you're asking me for legal advice, and I can't give you legal advice on the air, but people do come to arraignment and plead guilty. It happens.
Does it help them?
I don't know that it helps or it hurts them. So
saves the state money, though.
Right. And so a lot of times what we try to do is make an offer right at arraignment. So, Scott, you drove without your license, and if you come in and you plead guilty, we will give you 3 days of work crew, and then we're done. And so that happens a lot of times with some of the low-level offenses. Or DUI, here's your fine, and go on your way. But the risk of not pleading at arraignment is we learn more about you. We have more time to review the case, to look at the evidence, to find out more information. So we may have offered you 3 days of work crew at arraignment, but then we learn that Scott drives every single day without his license, and he has whatever other information. And then we may say, well, those 3 to 4 days of work crew might not be sufficient.
Well, you know, after 33 years of marriage, you might have my wife tell you that she'd like me to serve a little jail time. I don't know if you'd take that into account or not, but just so I could be out of her hair for a while.
Of course she would.
So, we only have 5 minutes left. What about the future of your office? Do you see anything changing?
So, there's always room for improvement and things that we can continue to work on, and first and foremost is the opiate epidemic. Since I took office, I took over all of the cases from the Attorney General's office, so I do all of the local prosecution of the drug cases in Orleans County. The U.S. Attorney takes some of the federal cases, but predominantly I take those cases. When I took office, I thought that was important because I know the community. I deal with the people, I deal with their parents, I deal with the families, and so having someone who's local and can understand the people as individuals is important, and so we've done that. And so continuing to work with the drug task force, continuing to target the people who are trafficking drugs in from out of state. We did have a heroin trafficking conviction. We have a couple of heroin trafficking cases pending, and that's something that we'll continue to work hard on. The other thing that I want to focus on in the next 4 years is the working with the Special Investigation Unit. So when I got here, we had an amazing detective, Jen Harlow. I think you've met her. Mm-hmm. She did a really great job and still does as a detective, but the structure of the Special Investigation Unit was not where it should be. So not the detective work, but the other parts of it. Mm-hmm. And so we've worked really hard to rebuild that, and we have an executive director. We have a victim advocate who works out of the Special Investigation Unit, And I want to continue to grow the unit and help them towards accreditation because it helps me with my cases when victims and their families are supported from the very beginning through the prosecution, connected with resources and therapy. And so focusing on those cases is another thing that I plan on doing with the next 4 years.
Does it ever come to your mind when you're prosecuting somebody that you talk about successful prosecution, but do you also work to make sure you're not getting a innocent person convicted?
Absolutely, Scott. So for me, it's not about getting a guilty verdict, it's about justice. Mm-hmm. And so we look at cases. I've looked at cases and declined prosecution. So law enforcement may send me a case and I think this just isn't up to snuff, and so I wouldn't prosecute those cases. Or if we were going throughout a prosecution and I learned something and it made me think that someone didn't do what they were accused of, I would dismiss the case. And so my pursuit isn't for guilty verdicts, it's for justice for the community.
You know, before we get off, I'll say another thing you do. You don't disappear. You know, at the end of the day, you don't disappear. You are a member of the community. As in, I know you go to like suicide walks that they have, and you go to different events. You're out there. So you're not this mysterious figure that just arrives in court and then leaves. And I think that's the other thing you've done for that office is you've put a face to the position. You put a face to your end of the law. Do you think you've really reached out like that as well?
Yeah, I try really hard to stay connected with the community, to go to community events all year, every year, not just election years, and to really make sure that I'm a member of this community. This is my community. This is where my husband and my son and I live, and we want the community to be the best that it can be. And so we try to be an active role in the community in all sorts of events.
And you know, some people could say, yeah, but that, you know, that could be dangerous because, you know, some people might not like you, but you don't have any problem, do you?
No, I don't have any problem being out in the community, Scott.
Yeah. And you know what? I think even people who do either bad things or illegal things, I think if they're treated what they feel is justly, fairly, I think there's a certain level of respect.
So a perfect example of that, I was in court last week, and this gentleman approached me, and he said, thank you for treating me fairly. I think that the sentence I got was fair and that the way you treated me was fairly. He was an aggravated domestic abuser, and he had gotten a pretty significant sentence, and a lot of that sentence would be served on furlough, but it was a jail sentence. And I was a little taken back, but I think that that's the truth. We try to be fair, and for the most part, I think that the people that we deal with know that.
Right. Okay, we've run out of time. Your final words.
I'd just like to thank you for having me. I think it's important for the community to hear what we're doing and for there to be accountability, and so that the community knows what we're doing and how we're doing it.
And now that we're only a walk from the courthouse, we'll have to have you here more often to update people what's going on in your world.
Yeah.
Which is your world, which is our world.
That's right.
So, okay, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Scott.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.